So if you're right to get started, the place I wanted to start was you've got what I think is one of the best fighter names I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you.
And could you tell us maybe what it is, and how does someone get their fighter name?
Well, I mean, anyone, to get a fighter name, you have to fight.
Yeah, step one.
So step one, you've got to commit to doing a chess boxing event, and you've got to fight in a chess boxing bout. And then it's really up to you what your ring name is. And some people don't have one at all. Quite often I'll work with people on their names and try and steer them in a certain direction, especially if people haven't really spent a lot of time with a brand or been to events. Because obviously we don't take ourselves too seriously. And so I kind of guide them in a certain direction to have something that's comical, usually a pun, or there's so many things you can do with regard to chess in terms of puns. That's kind of the general route to it. But myself, I was brought up on a farm. I run a farm with my two brothers. So I think when I was going to fight, I emailed all my mates and said, what should I call myself? And I think it was my friend Nick Mackey came up with Grievous Bodily Farmer, which is obviously a play on GBH. Yeah. So I was very lucky to have a friend who could think of such a great ring name, but it's quite long, so it's a bit of a mouthful. I always struggle to say Grievous. I'm not very good at saying Grievous, so I could often stumble over my own name.
Yeah, it's good though. I like it. I think it gives a good impression. It's both fun and threatening, which I think is probably what you want to go for.
Absolutely.
So if someone's never heard of what you do, chess boxing, before, maybe you could explain a bit how it works.
Yeah, so it's a biathlon. So it's a combination of two sports. Obviously, the name gives it away, chess and boxing. Imagine a boxing ring, and in the middle of the ring is a card table with a chess set on it. And you have two combatants who sit down, they play speed chess for 3 minutes. So speed chess is when you have a clock. So as you make a move, you start your opponent's clock. And then after those 3 minutes, you take out the board, take out the table, they put their gloves on, and then they go at it in the boxing ring. So they box for 2 or 3 minutes. And then the bell goes, and instead of going for another boxing round, they go back to the chess. So you go back to the same game of chess and then play another 3 minutes of chess. And you do that alternate rounds of chess and boxing till you win by knockout or checkmate. Now, the important thing to understand is, although they seem diametrically opposite in terms of the skill sets you need to do both chess and boxing, your chess ability is severely affected by your boxing performance. If you're tired and if you're losing the boxing, your chess ability nosedives. So although they seem completely disparate, they're actually, when you actually do it, you realize why the sport works with the combination of the two elements of it.
One thing, I watched a couple of bouts and bits of bouts, and one thing I noticed was the boxing's pretty ferocious. And I imagine there's sort of two reasons for that. I don't know if I'm right. One is maybe you get a little bit extra rest, not mental rest, of course, but maybe you get your breath back a little bit more. And the other is maybe often someone's going in realizing they're losing in the chess, and their only option is to win, is to knock the other guy out. Would you say that's right?
Definitely. I think it's very rare in any chess game that you get a completely even game. And chess, unlike other sports, so for example, I don't know, football, if you go a goal down, you reset, you play 11 against 11. In chess, if you go a piece down, you don't get to reset. So you've got a slight disadvantage. It's a bit like having a man sent off. And then, that advantage or that disadvantage, depending on which side you're on, will increase with each loss of material. So actually you find that chess playing gets more and more desperate as you go through the match. And that obviously impacts the boxing, because if you can see you're not going to win on the chess, or you're struggling on the chess, then you try to win on the boxing, and the way to win the boxing is to knock someone out. So you do tend to get, it does sort of split quite often after, say, the second round of chess. It's clear that one player is winning on the chess, and then they've got every reason to be more defensive, which also then allows the other fighter to be more aggressive, because they're less likely to carry a threat if they're, protecting themselves home to win on the chess. So you do, if one element becomes one-sided, you do find the other element becomes one-sided. Yeah.
It's interesting. And so it's like 5 rounds of each or so, and very rarely goes to the boxing points as well as an option.
Yeah, so it depends on the timing of everything is decided on the chess clock. So let's take a typical bout. So it'll vary depending on the abilities of the chess boxer. So if you're doing it for the first time, you probably have 2 minutes boxing and 3 minutes chess, and an extra minute of boxing, going from 2 to 3 minutes boxing, is big difference, like 50% more time. Yeah. And it's the moment, after the 2 minutes, you're already exhausted, you've got to do another minute. It's a lot more. So we tend to reduce the time of the boxing, and then it's 3 minutes on the chess. The trouble with that is you don't tend to get as good development in the chess game, and the narratives don't develop as well. So for the more experienced chess boxers, we'll have 3 minutes boxing, as I said, and 4 minutes chess. And then typically we'll have 9 minutes on the chess clock. So that means that you've got 9 minutes on each clock. So you've got 18 minutes in total. Let me get this right. Yeah. So you've got, you're able to get 5 rounds of chess in, aren't you? And then you get the equivalent. So then you'd get 5 rounds of boxing as well. So you basically get 10 rounds if you go the distance. But if it's a draw on the board, so if it's stalemate, then it goes to a final round of boxing, which is scored on points. So our referee, Ronaldo Dominguez, will basically adjudicate that last round of boxing. It's probably only happens a handful of times, maybe 3 or 4 times. So it's quite rare that you'll get a stalemate, but especially if you're a weaker player, playing for that stalemate is quite attractive. If you think you've got him in the boxing. So that's another tactic that the stronger player has to watch out for stalemates and repetitive stalemates in particular. So yeah, usually it's 10 rounds, but you can go to 11 rounds.
Really interesting. And it's so interesting how you've got 2 really complicated and deep strategic sports, and then another layer of strategy on top of that. I'll ask some more interesting questions in a minute, but I've got this burning curiosity in my mind of, it's this really interesting sight. You've got 2, boxers sat with headphones on face to face in the middle of the boxing ring. When you're moving the board in and out, do the pieces fall off much? Whenever I move a chessboard, they go everywhere.
Yeah, so we're lucky. We've got a highly trained set of stagehands who are part of our chessboxing community. And they kind of vary depending on who's fighting. So obviously, if they're fighting, they're not being a stagehand. But a lot of our community are good enough to volunteer. And actually, being a stagehand is the best job, because you get to see all the action. And then when you're doing your bit, there's nothing going on. You get to be right next to the ring. But yeah, essentially, you just be really careful. We also take a photograph of the board. So if something happens, we can replace the pieces. So there's a couple of things that we do, but generally speaking, it's down to just being really careful.
Smart, yeah. So I was just curious about that one. I want to talk to you about you as well. And how did you come to learn about chess boxing, and what were your first impressions?
Well, I don't know. I think a friend of mine invited me to go to a chess boxing event in 2009, which was at Bethnal Green Working Men's Club. And I don't know how many listeners you have from the UK, but if you've been to a Working Men's Club in the UK, you understand what I mean. They're of a certain vintage. They're usually sort of 1970s decor and sort of sticky carpets. and they probably haven't had a cleaner in there since the 1970s. And that's exactly what the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club was like. It's really like spit and sawdust, and there was no electronic board. They just had a big easel, I suppose, with a magnetic border. So it was really like basic stuff, but it was kind of like, it was kind of like Fight Club. You almost felt like you're in a basement.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely brilliant. And I was completely like taken aback by the sport. I mean, the idea of it I thought was incredible, and then seeing it was way more entertaining than I thought. This chess was really great. I mean, I knew how to play chess, but I wasn't really into chess, and I thought, well, that'll be a bit boring, that half. But actually, the chess was as interesting and as exciting as the boxing, which you probably won't believe until you go and see an event, but it's true. And I guess I had in the back of my mind, and I could never convince anyone to go back and see another event. And in 2013, a friend of mine who was a trustee of a charity that I worked for wanted to raise money, do a fundraiser. He wanted a white collar boxing event. And I was like, oh, forget that. I've been to this thing. It's called Chessboxing. It's absolutely brilliant. It'll be much better at attracting PR and raising cash. So I contacted London Chessboxing, just like their info at email, expecting not to get anything back, saying that we wanted to. My friend was from Chelsea. We wanted to put a show on in Chelsea. Would you want to, work with us and partner up, and we'll split any money we make between us and you, and hopefully raise some cash for charity. And got a really enthusiastic response back. And I know that Tim at the time was looking to attract a different audience, and Chelsea was quite far away from Bethnal Green Working Men's Club, not just geographically, but culturally. And I think he saw Chelsea's opportunity to reach a completely different audience. So we ran an event. Well, actually, so we planned an event in May 2014 in Chelsea. But before the event, Tim, I mean, the thing is, you always need fighters. And I think Tim saw an opportunity. He said, well, if you're going to get all your mates to come and watch you two really need to fight in the event. I was like, okay, well, I suppose you're probably right. So what I did is I trained, and I did an event in December 2013 where I fought Matt Reed in preparation for my fight in May 2014, when we actually fought on the fundraising event. And then after that, Tim invited me to come on board when they incorporated in 2015 as London Chessboxing. And I came on board as a finance director. Not that I've got any qualifications for that, but I know how to use a spreadsheet, basically. And then since then, I've sort of got more involved in the community and in the sport. And Tim emigrated to Australia a couple of years ago. And so it sort of came down to us to decide what we were going to do. And we decided to take up the mantle and keep the sport going. And that's what we've been doing ever since. And it's been, fantastic journey, and incredible group of people involved. So I'm very lucky.
I want to come back to the future of chess boxing a little bit later, because I think it could be really exciting. I'd love to hear from you. Training for that first fight, what was that like? Were you a chess player before? Were you a boxer before? Or was it both fairly new?
So I played chess with my dad as a kid, and that's it, really. I knew how the pieces moved, and I'd never boxed before, never done any combat sports. So I was really going in pretty green. Although I did, and I still do play sport in general, so I had sort of a level of, I guess, coordination that perhaps not everybody had, but I was really starting from scratch. And it was tough. I think particularly the boxing, because it's very time consuming. The chess, I don't know, if you like playing chess, it's not really much mature to train. But getting up early in the morning, going for runs, it's you get onto a treadmill and you have to sacrifice your social life and that kind of stuff, which is quite important to me. But it's definitely worth it when you step out in front of the crowd. It's quite an incredible feeling.
Yeah, I'm sure. For you, what have been the best parts and maybe the most difficult or challenging parts of being a boxer and being in the chess boxing world?
Well, I suppose taking being a chess boxer first, I think it's hard to steel yourself to get in that ring, even when you're sparring. But to sort of commit to getting into a ring with somebody else to try and knock you out, it takes quite a lot, and you never have perfect information. So, quite often our guys in the same gym will fight each other, so they've got a good understanding of what they're getting into. But quite often we'll have international fights, and we'll have people coming from abroad who, we do research, but very much we're trusting the promoters who are bringing those fighters over, and vice versa. So you do build up trust with certain promoters, but at the end of the day, you never really know how hard someone's going to train and how they're going to turn up on the night and what they're capable of. So there's a strange respect in the club, and I think in the boxing gym in general, between people who come to train because they enjoy it and then people who've actually been in a fight. There's kind of like a bit of a watershed there in terms of what it takes to do that. What was the second part of the question? I can't remember.
And what have been the most challenging parts of being a chess boxer or being in the chess boxing world?
So I think, being in the chess boxing world isn't really challenging. It's just fun. It's really nice. That's why we do it. No one's getting paid. But equally, on the other side of that coin, I suppose, is that the challenges we face are that we're sort of a startup running on a shoestring. We don't have any income. We rely on volunteers, and a lot of those. What you want to sort of produce something that's professional and competent, and is a production, if it's a live stream, that you can be proud of, but actually it's a real struggle because you're working sort of hand to mouth a lot of the time, and actually chess boxing gets a lot of great PR, but it's very much seen as a novelty. Which is essentially why I guess you're interested in what we're doing, which is not criticism at all. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that I think chess boxing in general, not just our community, but in general, struggles to take that step from sort of a novelty item to like a sport that people follow for the sake of the sport rather than because it's something strange. And there's an interesting dynamic and a bit of a shelf there. And obviously people involved in the sport, we've got some very hardcore fans who are totally into the sport and the characters and they get it. But for everybody else in the world, it's kind of, what is that? That's a bit strange. They move on to something else.
It's interesting you say that about being a novelty. Because I think in No More Mr. Niche Guy's defense, not that you were attacking, but we had a lot of discussions at the beginning of how we'd approach and how we'd talk about what people do. And the more we've gone along, the more seriously we've realized we've never been out to take the piss, but if you take it seriously, we'll take it seriously is the motto. But chess boxing particularly, when I told my friends and family about I was doing an interview with a chess boxer, that's what I was prepping for, they didn't get it. Whereas I think I did get it quite early, but they were just like, what the hell is that? So I've seen the struggle sort of firsthand. I get what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's understandable. I don't think it's I don't think it's something we're particularly worried about, but it is something it's become clear. And I think particularly when you look at there's a really interesting documentary that's come out called by Rook or Left Hook, which is the story of chess boxing, and it charts sort of the embryonic stages of the sport. And it's a great film, but what's particularly interesting is my business partner Tim and Ipa Rubin, who invented the sport, who did the first ever chess boxing bout. They kind of were working together initially, and then they realized that their ideas of the sport were completely different. And I think Ipa realized early on that he wanted to attract sponsorship. He wanted to make it into Olympic sport. And he realized that what he needed was credibility. And so he went down a route where he had very sort of professional standards, but quite sort of not particularly entertaining product. Whereas Tim went for like the Bethnal Green, spitting sawdust, but bootstraps, kind of like real entertaining. But he didn't have that professional edge and image, and Tim could never really attract sponsorship. Whereas Ipa managed to attract quite a lot of sponsorship and like financial sponsors and people who kind of wanted to be associated with this new sport. And perhaps we're still in the same position that we're not really that close to seeing us break through that barrier. But that film kind of really displays that struggle that Ipu's no longer with us, unfortunately. That he obviously identified quite early on and wasn't able to sort of overcome that.
I watched the film on your recommendation, and great movie, even if not just about chess boxing, but about these two characters and this battle of visions. And like you said, on the sort of the German side, and also very sad to hear Ipa's passed away. But on the German side, it was very serious and pretty straight-laced. And on with Tim's side, the English side, it was very entertaining, and there was stuff like, I saw clips of there's belly dancers in the ring in between fights, and everyone gets pretty jolly and has a few beers in it. I guess what I want to ask is, there's been this battle of visions. What happens after the film? Where's that now? Because I don't know if the World Chess Boxing Organization is still going on now Ipa's passed.
It's very much in flux at the moment. It's difficult to say exactly what's going to happen, but it's quite. Essentially, my understanding of it is that there's a guy in India called Montu Das, who's done a lot for chess boxing in general, but in particular in India. There's probably more chess boxers in India than the rest of the world combined. There's a huge scene in India, and he kind of inherited the presidency after Ipa passed. But I'm not sure if I think it is kind of thrown into turmoil. I mean, even down to things like we couldn't access bank accounts and all this kind of stuff. And obviously we've never been part of the WCBO. Obviously Ipa leave a huge hole in the sport, and it's unfortunate that Tim and Ipa never managed to work it out. And I think they probably would have both benefited if they could have come to something sensible. But obviously, with Ipa passing, we reached out to the WCBO members and said, "Look, let's get together. This is the kind of charter that we'd like to be part of. We want to see a fair and even playing field." And we've had lots of discussions, but we haven't really got very far, to be honest. It's kind of come and gone a little bit, and we've kind of left them to sort out the WCBO themselves. I think they've got a lot of work to do there, and then perhaps we'll be able to come to some agreement. But I think it's very hard, because it's something I've never really experienced before, but I think culturally, British culture is quite close to certain other cultures. It's quite far away from other cultures. And particularly when it comes to sporting bodies, you look at FIFA and those kind of super national sporting bodies, it's very hard to get something that works. And people have completely different expectations of what those kind of organizations should do and how they should behave. And I've got a new respect for anybody who's able to operate, something like a world governing body, because it's like herding cats, to be honest, because everyone's just, and it's not even that. People just have completely different points of view and perspectives, and sometimes there's no frame of reference for certain elements of it. So it's incredibly difficult. And if anyone can do that, then I will take my hat off to them.
If you were global emperor of chess boxing, what would you like to see happen on that sort of sporting association level?
Well, I think, my view is what I'd like to see happen is that we have a single governing body that only deals with the essential issues, which are basically making sure the rules are determining what the rules are, and then enforcing the rules and sanctioning fights. It really shouldn't be dealing with anything else.
Sorry, can I pause you for a second?
Yeah,
the phone
sure.
is going off like a madman behind me. Someone calling on the home phone. That is a rare treat.
I'm surprised you've got a landline.
Yeah, so am I. I don't remember having it. So you were saying some really, really interesting stuff. What would you like to see happen on an association level?
So I think a governing body should be as slim as possible. So it should just do the jobs it needs to do. And in my view, the jobs it needs to do are basically determine a set of rules and make sure those rules are followed across all of chess boxing, which basically entails sanctioning fights. And I suppose to do that, you've got all sorts of other ancillary requirements, like, how do you appoint members, all that kind of stuff. But basically, that's what they should do. They shouldn't really get involved in any commercial activities. And they should really be a charity, so that there's sort of transparency, and there's no question that people are operating in good faith. And if you can achieve that, then there's no reason why the sport can't flourish. But it is a problem because if you're you're an investor or you're a sponsor, you haven't really got a body that you can approach and talk to sensibly that's going to enable us to show some credibility. And even coming down to things like we're running events, and we've got a sanctioning body, but we're the only member, and that sanctioning body is really supposed to determine that we're operating safely, that the referees know what they're doing, that they're trained properly, all of those kind of things. You do need somebody above all the chess boxing organizations, which is responsible for setting out those criteria and those rules.
It'd be nice to see. It'd be cool. I'm really invested in the story now after watching the film and talking to you. It's an interesting one.
In a way, from a story and narrative point of view, you have to say though, actually, it's much more exciting with with these factions sort of kind of vying and competing for supremacy. But to work through it, it's a nightmare. But from the outside, in terms of from a media perspective, it's quite well. And I think it comes across in the film. It's it makes for a compelling story, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and good promotion as well. There were those the battle has been sort of part of the narrative as well. There was a point. We'll come back to chess boxing itself and what it's like to chess box. But while we're on the sort of the bigger picture stuff, I guess. There was a point where the WCBO branded chess boxing for a bit with the phrase, "The world champion chess boxer is the toughest, smartest man on the planet." What do you think of that as a message?
Well, I mean, the first problem with it for me is that it's the smartest, toughest man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an obvious one, isn't it, really? But I think, I mean, we struggle to get women involved in the sport as it is. Chess is a very male-dominated sport, as I'm sure you know, Dan, and boxing also is very male-dominated. So we have done a lot over the years to try and make it more welcoming for women to come to training. We've appointed a a director of Chessboxing Nation, whose specific role is to be a liaison for female fighters and potential female fighters. We've brought more women into our production team. We've got Jem Carmella, who's a fantastic MC. So, you know, we are really trying to. I don't think we're never going to get to equality. Well, certainly not in my lifetime. I think it's very entrenched as it is, but I think we've got to try. I think it's our duty to try. And people want to see women in the chessboxing ring as well. You know, it's exciting. So yeah, to have a man in the title, it's just a massive no-no. But otherwise, I think it kind of reflects the dichotomy between, you know, Tim's approach and Ipa's approach, and that it's quite serious, isn't it? It's quite a serious title. It's a little bit long. You know, it's not exactly good for a soundbite. And that just sums up, really. You know, Tim's events have got, you know, puns in them, and they're kind of catchy, but they're not serious at all. And Ipa's events were very serious, and I think the title sums that up. But we're certainly not looking for that man. What we're looking for is to grow the sport, entertain people, and make sure everyone's having a good time, including all the fighters.
That's really nice. I really liked your message there. And I think it'd be great to see more women chess boxers. One thing I do quite like about that phrase is it does capture the imagination of what's really interesting about chess boxing. Or one of the things that's really interesting is it's a test of so many things. Like boxing already as a sport of combat sports test your strength and your cardio and skill and willpower and endurance for punishment. And chess is a real test of focus and discipline and learning. And then with combining them together, you have all this stuff as well, I imagine, about controlling yourself and how you approach it emotionally. How do you prepare, and how does it feel to be stressed from so many different angles?
Boxing and chess both, really. You might think that in boxing, you want your emotions to run high, and actually it's the opposite. You want to stay calm and box, and the best boxers can do that. And actually, you know, when you lose your temper, or you actually end up being very open in a boxing ring, and you're more likely to get hurt. So obviously your heart rate's up, but actually you're trying to stay calm in the boxing ring most of the time. And then in the chess, you're also trying to stay calm and focused. Strangely, in the boxing, it's impossible not to be totally focused, because it's quite an intimate experience, boxing, because you don't really have any headspace for anything other than that moment and that person in front of you. You know, there's no past, there's no future. You're not thinking of whether you left the oven on. You're completely focused 100% on that person and whether they're going to punch you and how they're moving, and you're moving with them. And it's quite an intimate experience, as I said. And then the chess, you're really trying to shut everything out. You're trying to just focus, and particularly after a boxing round, you're tired, and your focus can wander, and your concentration can wander. And just like, you know, at the end of a football match with extra time, everyone's tired and people make mistakes. It's just the same on the chessboard. And if you can't refocus yourself and keep on reminding yourself that you need to be focused, it can be quite difficult. So yeah, it's weird actually that it's the build up where you feel the pressure and you feel the crowd and you're really nervous. But as soon as you start playing chess, everything else kind of fades away, and you really are sort of in the moment, and you're there really until the end of the bout. So the pressure doesn't really tell, certainly in my experience. Once you get in the ring, it's before the ring. It's horrible waiting to get in the ring.
I imagine. I'm sweating now just thinking about it. How do you train for chess boxing? How do you train for something like that? What does a training session look like?
So we have training sessions every Saturday at Islington Boxing Gym. No experience in SA, come along, 10 o'clock. Hope to see you there, Dan. And the way we train is very much like the chess boxing. So we'll do alternate. We'll start with sort of a warm up. Then we'll start with chess, speed chess, and we'll stop halfway through the game. We'll do some technical boxing, and then we'll go back to the same game of chess. And as we progress through the training session, we'll bring cardio more and more into the boxing element of it. So you'll start with technical stuff, and then by the end of it, you'll be in circuits, or we'll be doing bag work, and you'll be going back to the same game of chess. And it's practicing both the boxing, the chess, but also that transition, which is really important. And then the end of the session, we usually do a sparring session, which obviously is important experience if you want to actually get into the ring with somebody. And then we'll do a warm down, and then we'll go and play chess in the cafe and have a coffee.
Nice. Do you think training like that has changed you at all? Do you think you've got things out of it in your day-to-day life? I don't know if it makes you more focused or stress resistant.
I'm not sure that it has really. I don't know. I mean, the trouble is, Dan, I'm not very good at chess boxing, so it's hard to say if I've actually learned anything at all. I think it definitely builds a bit of confidence. Like if you're nervous about doing something, but you've had that experience where you've got in the ring and you sparred with somebody, I don't know, that gives you a certain sense of confidence, I think. And I do see it with people come in to training. They'll come in, they might be out of shape, slightly overweight. They're probably coming from a chess background, and they start training. You get them involved in the community, and you can just see them grow in the community. You see them make friendships, grow in confidence, lose weight, get fit, and quite often, if in 3 months' time, if they're training for a fight, you see a complete transformation, both physically and psychologically in people. And I think chess boxing does give people confidence, and I think it's also gives people an instant talking point. If you ever go for dinner somewhere, Dan, all you need to tell somebody is that you're a chess boxer, and that's it. You've got them in the palm of your hand. So I think it definitely does breed confidence in people, and certainly I've seen people arrive at the gym with very low confidence, and within a month or two, they've completely changed, and that's very satisfying to see that happen.
I've got to say, I'm already sold. I need to stop committing to trying the sports when I'm talking to people on the podcast, because I've got myself verbally committed on record to skydive and do falconry and all this stuff. But I'm extra committed to chess boxing. I do really want to give it a go. I think it's really cool. If someone was listening to this and they wanted to give it a go, what advice would you give them?
Well, if they're in London, my advice would be come down to training, obviously, or just near London. Otherwise, if I would go to your local boxing gym, most boxing gyms now have boxer-size classes, all kinds of classes. You don't necessarily have to spar. You could go in and learn the sport, learn how to box. Might not be for you, but if you enjoy it, then that's half of the sport. And then download an app on your phone. You can play chess anytime, anywhere. Play with friends. It's much more fun with friends if you can. Join your chess club, that kind of thing. But I mean, there's been such a huge explosion of online chess over the pandemic. If you haven't downloaded the app already, you should really think about it, even if you don't want to be a chess boxer, because it's a really fun game. It's really accessible, and the modern technology now, instead of when I learned, my dad taught me, and we used to play, and I used to get, I don't want to play anymore because he used to beat me all the time. And then eventually, one day I beat him, and then he didn't want to play me. Whereas with the modern technology, you get matched against people of a similar level. So each game is exciting and interesting, and you've got a chance. So yeah, I think there's no reason not to get involved. Just do it.
Brilliant. And where can people keep up with you, Gavin?
Yeah, so our brand is Chessboxing Nation. So it's chessboxingnation.com. Instagram is @chessboxingnation. So if you follow our social media for information about what we're doing, we're hoping to announce some dates in the spring. At the moment, we're just finalising those with the venue. So we'll probably have a full schedule, COVID notwithstanding, of events in 2022. So it's going to be a very exciting year.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks very much, Dan. Thanks for taking an interest in the sport. And I'm looking forward to listening to some of the other podcasts you've got. Yeah,
I'll share them with you. Brill. Thanks, Gavin.
And if you're listening to this on the Chessboxing podcast, make sure you head over and subscribe to No More Mr. Niche Guy. I know there's going to be some, not just chessboxing related podcasts, with some amazing niche sports on there. So get over and subscribe to that.
Thanks so much for having us, Gavin. Cheers.